Hey everyone, it's the Tiny One back with another review for you, and this one, probably quite thankfully for a lot of you, because a lot of you have been asking about it. It's the new Corsair Obsidian 500D, and I say it like that because I know you hate it when I say Obsidian. Strange clothes, Tom. Now stay tuned because we're talking about a competition. So this is the case that I'm going to have reviewed, but I have another one. And this we're going to give away. Now this has an Asus Maximus 10 Hero inside, an Intel i7 8700K, a GTX 1070 Ti, all housed in the only just released today, but I've had it for weeks, 500D. I think it might even fall into months. We've got a full set of ML RGB fans in there. There's a H150i 360mm radiator in the front. There's an MP500 M.2 solid state drive. We've got RGB, 32GB of RGB Vengeance memory in there as well. Hidden away in the back there is an RMI 750 power supply. It's got all the bestest, latestest, most awesomest bits in, and all you need to do is go and click the link to find out how you can enter. But let's get on with the review so you can see whether the case is actually any good or not. As always, we will start at the front and the top. So, power switch, reset switch, two USB 3s. I know they're not blue, but they're not USB 2s. They do have the normal fat USB 3 internal header. Then there is a USB type 3.1 Gen 2C header as well, with the new header that you may have seen on some of the newer Asus motherboards, for example. And then you get your headphone and your microphone front. Fairly simple front with that. You can see there are some triangular vents on the top of the case, and they do run the length of the aluminium top. There's an aluminium, I know people get funny about the way I say it, front as well, which I'll show you a little bit more about in a moment. But one of the things I can show you from while we're up here is if you pull the door open, sometimes it's easier to go from the other side, but the dust filter, if you want to run it for the roof, does come out the side. And you may think that's kind of strange because, well, I did. I instantly went to try and pull the roof panel off. And again, I'll explain better to you why and stuff in a minute, but the roof panel is actually screwed on from the inside. So the front panel, very nice aluminium front. It's curved as well. You can see it curves in around. So you can see I can get my finger in down the front of the case quite easily. But then when you open the actual case itself up, there is a large, I can get my hand in the front. So there's a lot of room there for the fans to be able to breathe. But also, very similar to the top, there is a dust filter in the front as well, and that goes in. It's all magnetic, it clips in really easily. So we've covered the front. Now, when we do get to the inside, essentially the inside, this bit here is pretty much the 570X, but there's more room at the top. So you have 60mm of room in the top for a fan or an AIO. An AIO is normally 30mm, your fan's normally 25, so you'll get about 5mm of extra room above the motherboard tray. There's a rack in the front, there's a rack in the top that you can remove, and it goes in from the inside rather than the outside, and that can house a 240mm radiator or a 280mm radiator. You can see it up there in the roof. There's two screws. You unscrew them from the inside and it comes out. You don't really need me to show you. You get the idea. You can also see the dust filter on the outside there. If you wanted to screw your radiator in from the outside, then you could do, but you have to take the roof panel off first. It's not as complicated as it sounds. So you put your AIO in first, clip it in the roof, and you can do it around the motherboard as well. So don't think that you can't. I think that's another reason why they give you that extra 5mm of room. You'd only ever run into issues if you had massive heat sinks or massive memory sticks. But if you think about it, memory sticks can easily be unclipped, so it's really not an issue. The front works in a similar kind of way as well. As you can see, I have a 360 fitted in here. This is the new Corsair H150i, but there is a screw here and a screw here. Undo those and you can take the whole thing out, so you put your fans and everything on, bolt it all into place and then screw it into the front of the case, which is really quite nice. The other thing that I can say is there's actually a good amount of room for radiators. So this is a Strix graphics card, which is, we'll say 300 millimeters long. And between the edge of the graphics card, which is here, and the front of the case, there is 125, 130 millimeters of room. So you could, let's face it, you could have an 80 millimeter radiator in there, really big, thick, beefy one, a set of fans, and you'd be absolutely fine. You could probably just about get away with having a push-pull 80 in the front. There's a mammoth amount of room if you go right up to the end of the power supply cover, but it's all going to depend on your GPU length. So to go right up to the power supply cover itself is 165 millimeters of room. But again, most graphics cards are going to be longer than a motherboard, and if your graphics card is longer than your motherboard, then you're going to have issues in this sense. So I think the sort of like 125, 130 for strict sort of length graphics card is going to be a good ballpark figure for most people. But you can get a 360 in the front, a 280, a 240, and any of the 120 millimeter increments, and then you can get a 280 or a 240 in the roof. So with 60 mils worth of room in the top, you're looking at a 30 millimeter radiator and a set of fans. And in the front, if you went for a 60 millimeter radiator, you could easily go push-pull. The other thing that's quite cool from this angle is something that they did, and it does go a bit dark, so I have to move the light as well, but something that Corsair did bring out for the 570X was a power supply end cover. And where this chassis is very closely linked to the 570X, that power supply cover is already pre-fitted. As you can see, the smoke on the doors is actually quite nice. It's kind of dark. I actually like, with a black case, the nice dark smoke. There is aluminium sections on the end of the doors, and you can see on when we go round the back, there's quite a large section of it there, but it does finish the doors off really nicely. I know I'm moving it around loads, but it does finish the doors off really nicely. You can see they're all nice and reflective where they're glass as well. They don't get scratched too badly like the plastic, but it is a really nice end to it rather than like something plastic or a horrible handle or something. They are on hinges. It's another reason why I've kept the camera down low looking up. So they are our hinges. There's one at the top, there is one at the bottom. To remove the doors, there is a screw here and here that you will need to remove if you want to take the doors off. We've whizzed this one off here already. Again, it's another reason why I left the camera looking down, but they pull off. It's very similar to the stuff that you would have got used to in the past with the Corsair doors. The top latch is longer, so when you do fit it, you make sure you get the top one in first and then line the bottom one up afterwards. Makes life really easy. Rear fan only 120, although you can move it up and down. Something that you can see from this, other than the fact I forgot to put the I/O shield on, is there are two, we'll call them expansion ports. I actually call them PCI mounts or PCI covers. But what you can do with this is Corsair are going to have a vertical GPU mount, and it all screws into the case, goes into the top of the power supply cover. And that's going to be available separately if you want it. Talking about power supply covers and power supplies in general, there is a dust filter in the bottom, but you can mount it either way because the top of the power supply cover is actually ventilated. Also, what they've done is they've added a grommet in over here so that you can poke your cables through for your front I/O, your USB 3, USB 2, any sort of covers, any sort of cables like that. The extra ones that you might want to have, like on this motherboard, for example, are RGBs you would have to run along. But I prefer the inboard grommet for the power supply cover than the external one for the GPU, because as you can see with ours, we've just routed the GPU out the side, and if I wanted to get really anal about clipping it all down, I can actually clip it on the end of the graphics card itself, and it doesn't make any difference. So that's just something for you to kind of think about, keep in mind. Round the back section, fair amount to talk about. Again, 570X, but you can put two 3.5-inch mechanicals over here, but you have got the screw mounts in them if you wanted to put normal solid state drives in as well. You've also got removable mounts here for 3 other solid state drive mounts. So if you're just talking about solid state drives, 2.5-inch drives, There's 5 in total, although these can be used as well as for the 3.5s if you want. It's all tool free. You can just whiz them out with thumb screws. They might be a little bit tight and you might need to whiz them off with a screwdriver to start off with. But you do also get this cable management kind of guide. We couldn't really do much more with the fans in relation to where our cables come through for the AIO at the front, but you can see that we've got our 24 pin, our PCI Express all hidden really well up here. The 8 pin for the EPS is up here. We do get a lot of cable management tie downs. We could have made it a lot tidier, if I'm honest, but because of being in Vegas and stuff and like short of time, we just kind of whizzed it in there. This we could again have got in down here. It would have just taken a little bit more time, and I probably would have had to have got creative with the SATA. But essentially, with this, you just need to spend a little bit of time on it. There's 2 screws for it, and essentially you need to kind of bunch them all in, get lots of zip ties and zip tie it all up together, and then just kind of wedge it in. And you can actually make quite a nice feature of the back section of your case. If you didn't want to run these 3.5 inches, for example, then one of the things I've been seriously thinking about doing personally is taking these out, getting all the cables really tidy, making some custom mounts for SSDs myself over here, and then running an LED down the side of the metal strip to light it up. And then that way, when you close the door, when the LED is on, it will light up your SSDs, and it's kind of round the back and it's tidy, but you're making a feature of it. Anyway, so you've got like a few options there. The door again just swings. You've got enough room down the bottom for up to a 225mm power supply. This is a 160mm length power supply, and you can see we've got a good amount of room in there to be able to hide cables. It would also be, if you didn't want to see this, really easy for you to be able to make yourself a cover to go over this to stealth it entirely. You'd only need a couple of cutouts for it, for a couple of cables, and then you could completely hide it so that when the doors close you're not going to see it at all. Short and sweet review? Maybe, yes. But essentially what they've done is they've added some aluminium to the 570X, and they've given the top a little bit of a stretch as well. So we've got the power supply cover that they've added on. We've got a little bit more room in the roof so that you can get an AIO with fans in the top without having any issues in there now, rather than just a set of fans. I think the only thing that I'm not sure about was the triangular kind of mesh in the top of the roof, and it did feel like to me like I should have been able to have pulled it off. I say felt like, but that's just because what we've been used to with other stuff. Obviously you can take that entire panel out and just fit it. I didn't have any problems getting an AIO in there with the motherboard in, but if you do, then you're just going to need to fit the AIO in there first. I know that might be a bit of a ball ache, but it's going to depend on how big the heatsink is at the top of your motherboard. With mine, it rocked around just fine because where the heatsink is right at the very back, you've got, once it's there, it has got enough room to kind of maneuver around without scratching the radiator or your fans or your heatsink on the top of the board or anything. Because all of the panels are fixed, it does mean that you have to put the dust filters in from the side. You will get used to it. Again, it feels a bit alien because, you know, we're not used to doing it this way, but once you kind of get the knack of it and you learn where to slide them, it's really not too much of an issue, and it does mean that you can keep things easily kind of serviced and clean and stuff like that. So we do know that we have other kind of similar versions, looking versions. There's going to be a kind of a bit of a range. This is the new kind of aesthetic for the Obsidian cases, rather than the like the very sort of square look that we were used to with the 750D and the 900D, for example. And I actually quite like it. It's a very welcome thing for them to bring a vertical GPU mount in. I know I've not shown you that, but I didn't think there was any point me showing you that until I've actually got one to show you it clipped in rather than just the graphics card bolted in the back. Because let's face it, you know what a graphics card's going to look bolted in the back. What we want to know is how good the mount is once it's screwed into the power supply cover and stuff like that. I've not got one yet, so I've not really included it. If they send me one, I may do a quick rush kit or like a Facebook video of it to give you a quick idea, and I might put like a link in the description and stuff underneath. But for the time being, I'm reviewing what I've got. So I do like it. I very much like the aesthetic. Let's face it, the 570X is a really good case in the first place, so having a different option for the outside, the different aesthetic, I think that kind of works. And it definitely deserves the OC3D Enthusiast Award.